BYU has announced the signing of another major recruit for men's basketball. How does this impact our expectations for this upcoming season? What's up? Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU and Big 12. But today it is all BYU because Cougar Nation just got some more excellent news that four-star recruit Kanon Catchings has signed with the program, putting another feather in new coach Kevin Young's cap. And so we are going to break down what all this means, how we fit in with the team, and what our expectations are for next season. But before we get into it, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really, really does help us a lot. So now let's get into it. So who is Kanon Catchings? He is quite the catch, if you will excuse the pun. He is a top 40 prospect among all major recruiting services, as high as number 31. And he is a 6'9" forward, a 3-level scorer, versatile athletic shooter who also caused problems on the defensive end, high IQ. What isn't there to like about this guy? I mean, seriously, Kevin Young has been working hard to bring in some legitimate talent. Catchings, he's also the nephew of Tamika Catchings from the WNBA, which no matter how hard they continue to push, I am still not watching, but that's just me. And then also his grandpa is apparently was in the NBA as well. So he comes from a very athletic basketball stock. And I mean, he was committed to Purdue, the national runner-up, lost in the national championship game, and decided ultimately to come play for Kevin Young here for BYU. So quite the get. It says a lot about this coaching staff. And speaking of which, and we'll talk more about the roster in a moment, but many of these coaches that Kevin Young is bringing in, they're bringing players with them. We've got Dunson bringing in Crawford, and you've got Kozlowski coming over with Burgess, and now we've got Catchings coming over. So this is a huge get for the program. Now, it sounded like it was between him and another guy, a grad transfer out of UNLV. And when they were talking about the two of them, I was like, I don't know, maybe the grad transfer makes more sense because he is a guy that, either way, it sounds Catchings is projected as a first-round pick in the next year's NBA draft. And so in all likelihood, he is a one and done. He is coming to play for this year. And I was like, well, we got a lot of talent. Is there room for him versus bringing in another guy who also will only be here for 1 year as a grad transfer, but he brings experience and size and, and maybe has a little bit less catching up to do. And so I thought, maybe it'd be kind of a sneaky win for BYU to bring the more experienced guy. But the more I learn about Catchings, by all means, this is a guy that can really help elevate BYU and take us again to another level. Additionally, just the narrative around the program, bringing in a guy like him, and then you bring in him and Demon in the same season, as well as Crawford and Kozlowski on top of it. I mean, just that recruiting class is huge, and what that says to other players, and that this is going to get their eye and say, oh, wait a second, these guys chose BYU, why? And so now, maybe before they wouldn't even be picking up the phone or responding to texts from BYU, and now maybe they'll be like, hey, I'll give this a look, I'll see what's going on, and it's definitely changing that narrative. And also, Kevin Young came in and said, hey, we are going to be getting guys into the NBA. So in order to do that, you got to start bringing in these types of talent. So I think this was a no-brainer when it comes between him and Boone, I believe was his name, the other prospect. But no-brainer. You bring in the talent here. And so, I mean, when we look at where we were just a few months ago, Pope left, and just the state that the program was in versus us now. It just seems like all the time we're just refreshing our feet, just waiting for that next bit of BYU basketball news, because it is constantly coming out, and there's a lot of good news to be had. And so it wasn't completely surprising. A lot of people had this on their radar. They noticed that after his visit that he liked or started following on Instagram both Crawford and Kozlowski. So again, that didn't mean anything necessarily. It could have meant he just liked these guys, wanted to keep tabs with other players from his class. But then there was this, which I just love that somebody, not only did they notice, but they took the time to zoom in and figure out what jersey he was wearing. Now, again, that didn't necessarily mean anything because he could have just liked the picture and thought that nobody would be able to tell what was on the jersey, just kept it vague, just happened to be from BYU. But it did end up being the case. So way to go for that detective work, fellas. So Kanon Catchings, his recruiting ranking, as we were mentioning just a moment ago, makes him the highest signee in program history at least since the metric has been in use. And BYU currently has its number 1, 5, and 8 highest 24/7 sports recruiting rated players of all time. And that's not even including Yegor Demin, who is most likely, if he were to have a grade, would be 1 or 2, which is just incredible what Kevin Young has been able to do in such short time. They didn't even have a full offseason. And then you look at this, at where BYU falls in on the recruiting. Again, without Yegor Demin included in this, I wonder how high they'd be with his score included. Now, to be fair, there's probably other top programs that are bringing in European talent as well. So, but, BYU score would certainly be higher, and I'm sure they would move up in this rank, just behind a little team called UConn. Ever heard of them? So good company to be in. In the Big 12, BYU comes in at 3rd. And so just what a huge get. Speaking of Demin, it has been officially announced, I believe it was yesterday, that he has officially signed and is on campus with the team. And so that is great news. He's there, and it's rolling forward, even though we've all known about that for weeks. Another guy that the team brought in, they announced just at the end of last week, was Max Triplett, who is coming from Snow College, which may not turn a lot of heads, but this is a guy that did really well in his conference. I think he was like all conference or something. But very importantly, not only does he bring depth at the center position, which is something that we really needed, he is a walk-on, so not taking up a scholarship position, where in the past it seems like this is the type of guy, this is like BYU's bread and butter type of guy. And if he's still coming, not on scholarship, rounding out the end of the bench, it is an incredible get for the program to continue to bring in these types of guys, and some guys that still maybe understand the BYU culture a little bit more, and to be there on the team with some of these other folks. But also, you got Triplett, you got Triple, and then also Trey Stewart. So the 3 guys, and with them all likely being at the end of the bench, I hope there's some games where BYU is blowing out the opponents. It would be great if those games were in conference, but where the 3 of them get to see the court together. So quite a get as BYU rounds out its roster. And I love this tweet from Shane. Colin Chandler went to Kentucky because he knew he wouldn't get playing time at BYU. Now, had Colin Chandler stayed, to be fair, probably some of these other guys just wouldn't be on the roster, and Chandler would be getting playing time. But it is incredible that Colin Chandler was a big hit, and now we've brought in at least a couple guys that are comparable to what he was going to bring, and then a couple more who are rated way higher. So it really goes to show what this program has done. Speaking of which, let's take a look at this roster. Quite the depth, quite the team that Kevin Young and staff has put together. We still have 1 available scholarship. Look at these incoming freshmen. When you talk about Colin Chandler, I can't remember where he came in. I think he was a little bit ahead of Crawford, Kozlowski. But think of them, I think, pretty comparable. And then some other big time gets in Kada and Mag. Just talked about Triplett. So, a lot of depth here. I think the question is, how is all this going to play out in terms of minutes for these guys where, by all accounts, Kevin Young is a straight shooter, and that he comes in with these guys and his pitch is, here's how I see your game. Here's how I see us developing your game. And here's how you fit in our system. And here's the role I see for you. So these guys have to be coming in understanding where their role is. And I don't know if you can count, but this is more than 5 guys. Obviously, not all of them are being told that they're going to be starting. I mean, and I'm talking about Dallin Hall and Richie Saunders too. These were guys that he had to recruit back onto the team. And so I don't know what he's telling each of these guys, but clearly they're bought in and they know what they're signing up for. Again, with several of these guys playing for or being recruited by a lot of these coaches in the past, that those relationships exist. So whatever they're being told in terms of their role, they're on board for, as likely seeing these guys as the starters, because Demon and Catchings are both likely one and done. So I would assume that they are going to be getting minutes in the starting lineup. Hall, obviously with Crawford playing behind him, being groomed for the kind of point guard of the future. We'll see how long he stays in college. And Mag, I've said this in previous videos, but he is, I think, there to guard the other team's best player to slow him down and bring in some defensive toughness. So I imagine he's there to start, although there might be matchups where you see any of these guys filled in as starters instead. And then Keita, I think they really like those rim running bigs is what they've talked about. So that's why I put him starting over Foose. And Foose came off the bench last year and did really well. So I could see that. But again, Kevin Young coming from the NBA where they're very positionless, I could see a lot of these guys being intermixed. There's possibility you see Demon and Baker coming in and both playing at the same time, or even one of them taking ball handling duties while you've got your other point guards on the bench. I could see all that, so I wouldn't think that they'd be locked in to a specific lineup. And I think as they get into, especially early in the season, they'll be, I imagine, experimenting with different lineups and seeing what works and where they can really develop chemistry and where the best fits are. But one thing about the roster that does worry me just a little bit is that you have a lot of guys from the previous roster or from last year's roster that are juniors and seniors, and then you're bringing in a lot of young guys, and some of whom are planning on moving on after this year or possibly after 1 or 2 years. And so that is going to be a lot of turnover over the next season or two. And so what you'd like to see is also some guys that are going to be around for a little bit longer to bring that continuity. I think this is a good problem to have because you've got the kind of guys that can be one and dones, but also you saw what happened with Kentucky where they were bringing in teams full of one and dones. There was one season where it was basically a hockey change. They had 5 guys and they would like swap them out for other first round high draft pick type talent coming off the bench, and they would just change out all those guys. So a lot of talent doesn't necessarily always equate to winning at the highest level. And now look at Kentucky, they just had the change and everything. So again, I wouldn't trade having this talent. That's a very good problem to have, but it is something to take into consideration and to look for, who are going to be the bridge guys between one rendition of a team to the next as Kevin Young continues to build out his rosters for the future. That is something that I would continue to keep an eye on. The other thing will be, how will infusing all of this new talent into this team this year work? I believe in our coaching staff. I think they have a true vision, and hopefully these guys are really bought in and willing to do what it takes. So I think that there is a very high ceiling for this team. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that they will achieve that. I'm not saying they're going to win the Big 12 conference or be a Final Four team, but I think if these guys all come together and play at their highest level and compete, I think they have that kind of talent. I think that kind of capability is there. Is it likely? Probably not. But I think the possibility for a very, very successful and unprecedented season at BYU is there. But again, it's going to depend on the coaching staff getting these guys ready, these guys buying in, and how they're going to jive and play together. So I'm really excited to see how all they do that. Maybe it takes part of the season. Maybe they struggle early on and then turn it on late, and hopefully can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. All right, Cougar fans, quite a bit to be excited about for men's hoops and Kanon Catchings, and we will continue to do these videos as any more news comes out, especially if that last scholarship spot is taken for the team. But let us know in the comments, what do you think of Catchings in this roster? What would you say the ceiling for BYU men's hoops is next year, and how do you expect them to perform? Let us know in the comments. And again, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Go Cougs!